like any professor, I am now retired after 41 years. You can push a button and I will speak for 5 hours. But that is not the best way to do it. An introductory comment, I would say that in my view, the reality is that we still have empires in the world. They're economic empires that are also supported by military force. To me, it is extremely logical that the United States, with less than 5% of the world's population, consumes about 40% of what the world produces, and also spends more than 40% of what the world spends on its military. Our military is proportionate to our way of life, to our empire. We have military bases in over 80 countries around the world. This is not new. Warren G. Harding, way back in the 1920s, said, "What is good for General Motors is good for America. And what is good for America is good for General Motors." We can translate that today in almost the same language. What is good for United States multinational corporations is good for America, Monsanto included, as it is operating in India. And what is good for Monsanto is good for America, and what is good for America is good for Monsanto. And our military is there to enforce our right to control global resources. Most people don't describe the United States as an empire, but it is. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I think it is a duck. And we need to be aware of that. Who the emperor is, who the president is at any point in time, has global significance. Because if it is an ill-advised leader, or a leader who is mentally unstable, that is a danger for the entire world. Not just a nuclear danger, but a danger of climate change, of increasing global temperatures with disastrous consequences. And so I am one who is neither Republican nor Democrat. I myself have a point of view. For over 20 years, I have been active with the Green Party. The Green Party is an environmentalist party, very strong in Europe, not so strong in the United States, and I think not strong at all in India. But it is not about a party. It is about a movement, a consciousness that we must, as Gandhi would say, live within our means. We must live simply so that the world can simply live. Gandhi is, to me, the most relevant voice in the world today. Should be listened to more in India, but should be listened to more worldwide and in the Green movement. Gandhi lives. In the Green movement, they are listening to the voice of Gandhi. To live with your environment, to use only your fair share of resources, to encourage participatory democracy, Swaraj, self-rule, decentralized. So here you will hear one who has been influenced by Gandhi, who is not happy with the US empire, and who is largely seeing a need for a better leadership worldwide. Thank you. didn't take 5 hours.
Sir, but why are we discussing, why is it important to discuss US presidential elections? Does it really matter?
There is real choice. It is a system that is seriously flawed. It has major problems. But among the Democratic Party especially, the 6 remaining strong candidates, there are at least 2 that are significantly more progressive than the others. And those 2 are potentially real change agents. I think the others are more of the same, of the past. Moderate Democrats supported by corporate money, not wanting to change things very much, talking a good talk. We need a Green New Deal. But when Pete Buttigieg talks about a Green New Deal, in one voice, he is talking about oil exploration off the coast in the next voice. He is not being consistent. If either Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren become the nominee of the Democratic Party, the United States will have a choice more dramatic and clear than in any presidential election since Franklin Roosevelt. And it will make a huge difference which of those candidates win, whether it is Mr. Trump or a progressive Democrat. It would make a huge difference.
And sir, as in my introductory remarks, as I said, in a system of complex interdependence and globalization, the multilateralism is the way forward. But America, with Donald Trump coming to power, he has changed the politics, right? So he's going more on an isolationist basis and more or less dealing bilaterally and not taking along with the multilateral partners. We see the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the treaty that is there. Then we saw the climate change, Paris Climate Treaty, and also the most important, JCPOA, the Iran deal. So how do you see all these things happening? No, not giving impetus or not giving influence to the multilateralism, but focusing more on bilateralism and the protectionist attitude of the American presidents.
Well, I would disagree. I don't think Mr. Trump is isolationist. I believe he is very nationalist. He is advocating economic nationalism in terms of international political economy. He wants to dominate and dominate the economy worldwide. His idea of a good deal is a deal that benefits America first. He does not want to be isolated. And so I think what we have here is a reality where an ultra-nationalist who is not very even aware of United American government institutions, I think he would have benefited from taking a US government class from me, just to know the basics. Thinks he can do anything. And he sometimes doesn't even think. He just acts on ego. And I'm saying that out of sadness, because I feel bad for Mr. Trump. I believe that, yes, he is dangerous to the world, but I think he is also a very sad man. He needs always to have others praising him. I deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. I am more worthy of the Nobel Peace Prize than Gandhi or Mother Teresa. accept this? Who is going to say that? First, Gandhi never received the Nobel Peace Prize. He was too radical. Did you know that when he was killed, the Nobel Committee gave no prize to anyone? Gandhi didn't want it. He didn't care for it. His ego was not involved. Mr. Trump has his problems, but his problems become the world's problems. He pulls out of the Paris climate change agreement. It was not a good agreement. It was not enough. I mean, it was better than nothing, but it was not enough. And he pulls out of it even so. Even U.S. corporations are now doing environmental policies because they see it in their economic self-interest to do so. The governor of my state is making policies that are in agreement with the Paris Accords. So many people are not following Mr. Trump because he is not a leader worthy to follow. You can speak about your own government, your own leadership. You are qualified for that. I need make no comment there. But Mr. Trump needs to be defeated next November, and he needs to be defeated by a progressive candidate who the world can have faith in, an honest person who is worthy of support. It can happen.
Sir, I have a question there because can we say with the defeat of Donald Trump in the upcoming elections, which seems unlikely as of now, can we say that it will set a tone, it will set a precedence across the globe that the rise in populism and the nationalism is there and rise, but with his defeat, it can change the course of the international politics?
I think whether Mr. Trump wins or loses in November will have a large impact worldwide. There will be a rippling effect either way. And there are so many factors to consider. The most basic factor is voter turnout. The United States has one of the lowest participation rates of any democracy in the world. We usually rank last, except maybe for Switzerland. We're down at about 54% of our registered voters, and that's only about 80% of the population. So when it comes to voting age population, we turn out at less than 45%. Mr. Trump won the Electoral College with fewer votes than Hillary Clinton in 2016. It's another issue, but basically, there was only a 54% voter turnout. Mr. Trump won about 48% of the 54% of the people who voted. So he was elected with less than 1 vote in 4. If the voter turnout had been instead of 54, 56, Hillary Clinton would have won, easy. If it had been 52% instead of 54, Mr. Trump would have won, easily. That's the way it is. What will the voter turnout be next November? That depends upon who the Democrats nominate. If the Democrats nominate someone like Hillary Clinton, she's not running, but if they nominated Joe Biden, who would be similar to Hillary Clinton, Trump could win because the turnout would be low again. The young people and others will not be excited to vote. If the Democrats nominate someone like Bernie Sanders, I predict the voter turnout could be as high as 60% or more. And not only will Mr. Trump lose the election, but the Senate will become Democrat again, and it will be a historic victory for the Democratic Party. But it's about voter turnout. Among people 50 years old and younger, Bernie Sanders is preferred by 50%. Joe Biden is preferred by 16%. You can see the difference. The young are not going to vote for Joe Biden. Mr. Trump has a core base of about 30% of the population, almost entirely white, almost entirely rural, outside of cities, relatively uneducated. They will vote for Mr. Trump no matter what. So what the Democrats need is a candidate who will mobilize women, who are a majority of the population, yes, who will mobilize non-white people, who are becoming a very large part of the population, and who will mobilize the young. Someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren will predictably mobilize the young, non-white people, and people of progressive politics. Bernie is not going to win the 30% that support Trump. Nobody is going to win them. Those people are going to vote for Trump. They cannot be alienated. They cannot be lost. The way to victory in November is to have a high voter turnout, 56%, 60%, 65% would be a revolution at the ballot box. It can happen.
Sir, what about the issues like building the wall, not starting another war with another country? Are these issues going to figure in the elections?
Oh my. What can I say? It is embarrassing that of the adult population in America, only half can name the three branches of government: executive, legislative, judicial. The other half do not know that. We have an astonishing, undereducated voting population. For them, they vote mostly by what affects them directly. War with Iran is not going to affect them directly unless they are drafted into the military and having to go kill somebody. Mostly foreign policy issues are not of great concern to most people in the United States who just live regular lives, yes. Maybe they don't even read the newspapers. That is the reality. But what they do feel is economic hardship. They know if they have a hard time paying the rent. They know if they have job insecurity. They know if they go to the hospital, they're going to be in debt maybe for the rest of their lives. They know these things. So these issues affect them very directly. I think Mr. Trump doesn't understand that. He has lived a privileged life. He thinks the economy is doing great. unemployment is less than 4%. Of course, everyone is happy. Well, he needs to be able to speak to some of my students. My students at my school, yes, they have jobs. Sometimes they have 2 jobs. Sometimes they have 3 jobs, because all of the jobs are low pay. And the cost of rent is up. The cost of tuition is up. Transportation is up. Healthcare is up. And they cannot pay their bills, even with 2 or 3 jobs. They know that they are hurting. Maybe they don't know the 3 branches of government. Maybe they can't even find Iran on a map of the world. But they know that they can't pay their rent. Yes? They can't. That is very real. And I think Mr. Trump does not understand that. He simply cannot relate to that. Someone like Bernie Sanders can, because Bernie Sanders came from a family like that. Bernie's father was a Polish immigrant in the 1930s, a Jew coming out of Europe. Undereducated, he came to America broke, no money. And he worked hard, and he was never rich. That father was never rich. But Bernie Sanders knew what hardship was. He knows how people feel when they cannot pay their bills. He has been a democratic socialist from the time he was 20 years old. He has not changed. And he relates to people and their pain. Those people will vote for him. And I think they will. If they vote at all, they will vote for him. Not because they're politically informed, not because they know where Iran is, but because they have faith that someone like him can feel their pain and help make a change. The voter turnout will go up. That is the way to win.
Sir, could you please shed some light on Donald Trump's visit to India? Some people, I was reading some articles. It was written there, Trump's coming to India is somehow he's trying to move the voters of Indian American community. He's coming to India, trying to influence them. And is it really going to impact elections or not?
I hope not. I mean, it didn't work very much in the elections in Delhi. Now did it? I will be at Ahmedabad this time next week. I myself have very close friends in the Gandhi community at Sarvodaya Ashram, going back almost 50 years. I came to India first time in 1971. I know that he is there today at a cricket stadium, the biggest in the world. I don't know what, maybe it is full with 100,000, 1 lakh people, maybe. But I don't think much will come from it. I think Modi is trying to feed Mr. Trump's ego. And he has a big ego, and so that's a good way to start. You will have 5 to 7 million people between the airport and the cricket stadium. 5 to 7 million people. There are only 5 million people in Ahmedabad. Mathematically, how are you going to do that? Everyone and their baby is going to be along the marching route? I don't think so. I mean, to me, this is just comical. But if Trump leaves feeling he is loved, and he needs to be loved because of his ego, maybe there will be some kind of deal possible. But I don't think it will be a deal that will benefit the world. I don't believe that increased global trade is the way to stop the climate change emergency. I believe a Gandhian economic approach makes sense. You live simply as others may simply live. You have small scale production. You are not focusing mainly on export or import. You feed the local populations. You have more self-sustaining communities. I know that sounds idealistic, but think about it. How much pollution and carbon dioxide is produced by increasing global trade? Nobody talks about that. But it's a massive destructive force. Me coming to India, flying on a plane, it's a very bad thing. I should have come by boat. But for India products to go to the United States, for our products to come here, it is a big global trade deal. I don't think it is in the interest of the world to have it. Not for the United States or India. And do you really need to have American weapons? We are the greatest arms manufacturer of the world. Why? You know that we will sell to Pakistan also. So we sell to India, we sell to Pakistan. The big arms companies make lots and lots of money, and then we watch the two halves of Gandhi's India kill each other. Please don't do that. You know, for the sake of heaven, do not do that. I would say, as Gandhi, embrace as brothers. It is never too late. Pakistan has its problems. The military is far too strong in Pakistan. Democratic institutions are very weak. But we must try to build relationships. Another war will solve nothing. I was here in the last war between India and Pakistan. When Bangladesh came into being, I was in Kolkata, in 1971. For a month, I was at the Gandhi Peace Foundation. I was distributing supplies to refugees from East Pakistan. It was not yet Bangladesh. Yes, I mean, India won that war. Bangladesh came into being. But many of the refugees could not go home. Many millions could not go home. And now what is happening to them? They have to prove that they have been in India since before December of 1971. Where is the compassion in that? They are mostly Muslim. Is that really a problem? That was never a problem for Gandhi. Gandhi believed that Muslims are our brothers. Sikhs are our brothers and sisters. Why cannot we live as one family? We can. We must. The choice is disaster.
Thank you so much, sir. The floor is now open for discussion. If you have any questions, any comments to make, please speak.
critical states in US. This was from Florida, Pennsylvania, and one more. Here, normally, the margin of victory is very less. And do you think that Indian population could influence the outcome there?
I must be very honest. No, I don't have to be. I could lie. But I am honest, and so I will say, I don't know really where the large concentrations of Indian population are. My impression is that there is a heavy concentration in New York. That will go Democrat no matter what. I think there's a large concentration in some other East Coast states, Texas perhaps, but I think Texas is, the more important factor there is the Latino population, the Mexican American population in Texas. If they vote, the Democrats will win. I don't think there are enough people from Indian background to make a difference, really, in Texas. Even if they all vote for Trump, I think it will not make a big difference. Florida is an interesting place and has been a key swing state in at least 4 of the last elections. Again, it's about voter turnout. There is one very important factor in Florida that has happened in the last 2 years. Maybe you did not see it. A very progressive movement in Florida managed to change their voting policy to allow people with a felony conviction to vote. In Florida before, if you had been convicted of a serious crime, you were banned for voting for life. That has changed. Compassion has happened. And those who were banned from voting 2 years ago now can vote. And that is a very large number of non-white people, African American people especially, who have some criminal conviction. They could vote in my state of Oregon, but before they could not vote in Florida. Now they can vote in Florida. And we're talking lakhs of people can vote, and they will vote Democrat. And so I think Florida may surprise the world by supporting the Democratic Party candidate. But again, it depends on who it is. And if the young are not moved to vote, then Florida can stay Republican.
Again, I think very impression itself could be all states. The whole Indian community is not constituted by the Marwadis and Gujaratis. There are people from other states also. I think they think about the policy in India, Modi's policy. And those who are disenchanted with Modi and Modi's policy, I don't think they would support Trump. So to say that, or to believe that the entire community, Indian community, or even the majority will vote for Trump, I don't know how far it is believable, it's convincing. It's only a comment. We are given the impression like that. You see the Howdy Modi, a stage man we show. And we have an Indian show here also today.
What you mentioned, I think that Sanders and Trump are having a more of the same constituency. You said that more people are dedicated to think about themselves only. I think both these two constituencies, Trump also is having people from the same constituency, and Sanders also.
There is an overlap. Well, I am appearing to be white, and I myself come from a relatively lower middle class family. My father was a single parent. We had trouble paying any bills. I was often left alone while he was at work. I understand that reality. I think when people are hurting, they want change. Trump was the only change candidate in 2016. You understand? Hillary Clinton was the status quo. So psychologically, many people, I want change, I want change. Trump is going to, drain the swamp. He is going to clean up Washington. I want change. And Hillary's a crook. She's like all of the other corporate elites. But Trump is a billionaire. But he's a different kind of billionaire. He's a good billionaire. It's irrational, right? Now, if Bernie Sanders had been the candidate in 2016, he would have also been a change agent then, as he is now. And I think he would have beat Trump in 2016. Not because of logic, not because of intelligent, well-informed voters, but because many people would like the change message of Bernie Sanders better than the change message of Trump. I mean, the change message of Sanders is, we will have national health care for all. There will be no more bankruptcies because you cannot pay your medical bills. We'll force the pharmaceutical companies to control the cost of prescription drugs. We'll force it. Everyone will have health care, cradle to grave. Students who are in debt, your debts will be wiped out. The student education should have been free in the first place, and the debt should be no more. Bernie is saying the same things now that he was saying in 2016. I think he's a little bit more environmentally aware now than he was then. I wasn't quite as happy with him in 2016. But everyone changes and can improve their understanding of the world. Many people in pain in 2016 would have voted for Bernie Sanders and not Trump. But they really had no choice. Trump is for change. He is like, he is the watchman. He will take care of us. Yes. And Hillary Clinton, she is just more of the same. Well, the Democrats, I hope, will be smart enough to nominate somebody who is not more of the same. Because if they do, Trump can win again. It is possible.
As you rightly pointed out that large majority of the voters, large majority of the voters there are not much concerned about the foreign policy or Iran war or other issues, international issues. They are more concerned about the domestic issues, employment, health scheme and other things. According to some of my friends in California, Florida and other places, they give an impression that majority of the people in that area, especially rural area or they are less educated, they are favoring Trump. And the elite and intellectual classes, mainly in the New York or the cities, they are favoring this Democratic candidate, Bernie Sanders or likely. So in that context, their connection is that still, especially because of the Trump's Mexican policy and other policies, despite the controversy in impeachment and other issues, he still has a solid vote bank among the illiterate or semi-illiterate or people who are more not concerned about the international relations of the policy formulation. That will help him again to come back to power. How far it is true?
Well, again, like I said, Mr. Trump has a core base. It could be as much as 30%. the United States is not a rural country. It is an urban country. So yes, Mr. Trump will carry most counties, rural counties, low populated counties. And it's not just that they are underinformed, it is also cultural. I lived a long time in more rural agricultural areas, and many of these people are anti-government, they're anti-tax, they certainly want to keep their guns, and they don't want any government control of their guns, yes? That is their self-defense. And there is a genuinely conservative population, more in the rural areas. And Trump will mostly carry those areas. But that is not the majority of the population at all. The agricultural population has gone down. It's less than 30% of the population. So again, if there's a 54% voter turnout, and those 30% vote because Trump is their savior, yes, then it is possible they can win. You can see that? But if it is 56, 58, 60%, the urban areas, more poor areas, more non-white areas, they will carry the day. It is simply mathematical.
Usually farmers were affected by Trump's imposing duties on China.
Yes, when it comes to, I think they want you to use the microphone so that we have good sound system for the recording, by the way. And so, cooperate unless it is not good. People who support somebody often are irrational in their support. The farmers of Iowa who favor Mr. Trump, they know that his trade policies with China have hurt them badly. But then Mr. Trump also has passed subsidies in Congress to help relieve that pain. So they have faith in him that he'll get a good deal. And they are happy that he has given them some support to make up for their losses in not having trade with China. So, but many poor people would benefit from health care, would benefit from food stamps, where we have support for people who are hungry, but they do not want it. My father was like that. I don't want government in my life, son. I don't want government there. But Dad, we have a hard time getting groceries. I will never take welfare. Never, son. I will starve first. I mean, this anti-government attitude oftentimes is very irrational. And I think we have it here. In India, yes. People voting for candidates because they have faith in them, even if that faith has nothing to do with the policies. Yes? I hope we have more politicians running who are honest, who say what they mean what they say, and who can be counted upon to do their promises. Now, Mr. Trump has done his best to build his wall, the wall with Mexico, yes? It is symbolic. It is very racist. It is, what can I say? Wrong in so many ways, in my opinion. I have an adopted daughter who is from Mexico. All three of my grandchildren are Mexican Americans. Okay? We're building a wall to keep my daughter's family from coming into the United States, her cousins and her brothers and her sisters. Okay, why? To keep America white again? This is no policy. This is racism, pure and simple. And it is also not practical, because no wall is going to stop people who are desperate. They will find a way. If it is a matter of survival, they will find a way. And I will open my home to them. Yes?
I'm a student of international law, and for past few years, it's not a great time for international norm setting or something. We were till this moment we were talking about what is going to happen in the next couple of months and election results. What happens if the nationalist forces continue to be in power for next 5 more years? What down after 5 more? I mean, what is after 5 years down the line? What do you see?
Well, more pain will happen. But what does it mean to be in power? Forgive me for semantics, but people are in power only if we cooperate with them. Gandhi knew that. I would hope that in those countries with racist and harmful policies, with neo-fascist governments, that the people, myself included, will be out on the streets taking the power away from the powerful. We have the power to say no. We have the power of non-cooperation. We do not have to be passive in the face of an election defeat. Gandhi himself had faith in that power. I remember having an interview with Morarji Desai. He was one of many Gandhi followers that I interviewed in the past. He was the chancellor at Gujarat Vidyapith, and I came into the room, I was a young man, and I said, Mr. Desai, tell me, what do you think of Gandhi's last will and testament? He looks at me, what? What is that? And I said, well, the statement that he made in the last month of his life, that he would like to see the Congress Party disband itself and become a service organization helping the poor organize for justice at the grassroots level. What do you think of that? Well, I disagree with that. Oh, he was very angry with me. I didn't know that. I disagree with Gandhi. I said, oh, well, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I disagree with Gandhi sometimes too. Well, I disagree with him about that. And you're a very arrogant young man. And then I got a little angry because I have something of an Irish temper. Yes. And I look at Morarji Desai and I say, I have been called many worse things than that, sir. You're a very arrogant young man. I have been called worse. And the interview stopped. And I was asked to leave. Well, I look back at that, and what Gandhi wanted was people power. He didn't even care about the Congress Party itself being a vehicle for power. He wanted people to take power here, not necessarily here, so that whoever is in power here at the top, whether it's Narendra Modi or whether it's Nehru or anybody else, Gandhi wanted the people to have the power to say no, for the people to have the power, the courage to stand up and say, you're wrong. This is not about the BJP, it's not about Congress Party. It is about power. Where should power be? If we accept the responsibility, the power is with us. We don't have to surrender it. And I myself will not.
This is something about. I was told, or I learned during the last election, that had all the supporters of Bernie Sanders went to the polling booth and voted for Hillary Clinton, she would have won. But they were angry for Bernie Sanders being ejected out or through manipulation. That was their belief. How can you, what do you think it is very idealistic to think that a democratic socialist like Bernie Sanders to be elected by the American free market loving society? Because last time, we call it is the election market of America that elect the American president. Even last time, Bernie Sanders, he was almost ignored by the media in America. And he was called a commie, the regeneration of McCarthyism. Don't you think they will do the trick again and make him very unpopular?
Well, you are correct that the media is, for the most part, corporate owned in America. 4 major corporations own the major networks and most of the newspapers. And the bias will be there. That is a problem. On the other hand, there is social media. The social media is not corporate owned. And young people are very in tune with social media. You should see Bernie Sanders with his advertisements on Facebook. They're very powerful, and the young are hearing it. They don't have to see it on TV. Most of them aren't watching much TV now anyway. They're watching their cell phones. And so, I think your concern, with all due respect, is more of a concern of someone my age. The young are getting their information through other means. And those means cannot be easily controlled, not in the United States. Maybe they can be controlled more in India. Certainly they can be controlled more in China. But even in China, there is dissent. And it can't be stopped. It really cannot be completely stopped. Gandhi would say, what you seize by force, you will have to keep by force. What you win by nonviolence, you will keep by nonviolence. If someone controls you by force for very long, the people know it. I think they know it in China. And as soon as the foot gets off the person's back, the people will rise up. And you can see that in Hong Kong. You can see that dramatically in Hong Kong. The Chinese media can control what the people hear about Hong Kong for a while. But truth, crushed to earth, will rise again. Truth is God. Truth will have its own power. the people in China sooner or later will know what has happened in Hong Kong. Even if they are lied to today, the lie cannot last. So I have faith in truth. I have faith in the power of truth, in the power of people, in the power of courageous young people especially, whether that's in Hong Kong, whether that's Greta Thunberg in Norway, wherever it may be. And change will come. The question is, can it be fast enough? Because climate change cannot wait. We have an emergency, we must move fast. We will see what happens. But I hope all of us can do our best to make others aware and to move, not wait for the politicians to move, but to act ourselves. It is an emergency. Life on this planet is at stake. That is not an overstatement. We have maybe 10 years to turn around the current trends. Or the UN says we will have 1 million species dead, extinct, gone from the planet. The crops, I see a future where if we do not change, if we don't listen more to Gandhi now, half of the population of the earth, half of India, may be dead in 20 years. That is not trying to scare anyone. That is simply what I see as factual. The emergency is that severe. We cannot talk about action, we have to do action. And if Mr. Trump or Mr. Modi or anybody else does not see that reality, we must act to make them see that reality. It is our duty.
I just adding to what Professor Abraham asked you. This is about the suspect in Bernie Sanders. You said Hillary was a suspect because she was not so sure about or the stand she had taken during the last election campaign, various issues. Similarly, if you look at Sanders' campaign now, he is not positioned himself on various issues, including the elimination of the health insurance scheme. I don't think he has taken a stand, a clear-cut stand on that. He has not even taken a stand on the wall construction. I mean, basically the migrant population issue is still hovering around it. As far as I follow the campaign, he has not taken a position on this. So, if in 90s it was the decade of neoliberals, 2010, 2020 is the decade of neo-socialists. Not only in US, Germany copied to Bernie Sanders. And across the globe, they are defeated at the end of the day. While Corbyn was campaigning in UK, the numbers were projected in a different manner that the youngsters are actually supporting Corbyn. But in the actual election, the real-time election results show that they didn't support Corbyn. Same is the case with Elizabeth Warren. Same is the case with, I would say, Sanders also. So how realistic your understanding about Sanders' victory? Because I see there's a 20 to 30% gain that could happen this time for Democrats. And if that happens, what you said is correct, 54 will become 70%. If that is the case, how could our American electoral administration to, because I think the last century, we've never seen an election which tests more than 65 to 68% of voting share. I don't think election commission or the counterpart in America, the election administration has tested that kind of high percentage of voter turnout. So, do you think November 5th will lead to another, I would say, there is a question mark on the way the poll is conducted, the way the administration has played a role in that, the conduct of poll, or even whether this poll outcome would be questioned, challenged by Trump if he is defeated?
Well, forgive me, but some of what you said I could not understand well because of the microphone, I think. Honestly. But when it comes to, let's say, Mr. Sanders and the border wall and immigration, he's very clear. The wall should not exist. He would take it down. And the camps on the border should be processed, and the people should be released from the detention, especially the children that are separated from their families as part of Mr. Trump's policy. Mr. Sanders has been, almost everyone has been very critical of that. The children are being scarred psychologically for life by being taken away from their parents and kept separate in cages. It hardly can be any worse than that. And it shows in the polls that Mr. Sanders has more Latino support than any other candidate. He is coming up, Mr. Biden has good, strong support among African Americans, but Bernie Sanders is now only 2 percentage points behind Biden in terms of African American voters. And mostly it's the older African American voters that favor Biden. And the youth, African American, white, Latino, are overwhelmingly in favor of Mr. Sanders. You can go, I went to a rally with 40,000 people for Bernie Sanders. The election commission that you mentioned, that is enforcing the federal elections law. It's a 7-member commission. It has very little power, but they review campaign donations. There are some restrictions that you cannot accept money from a foreign power, for example. That is forbidden. So India cannot influence the election. Bernie Sanders has broken all records in terms of contributions. He has now over 1 million individual contributions, averaging $18 each. He has no billionaires supporting him. He has literally millions of voters giving a rupee here, a rupee there. Well, it's crowdfunding, kind of, yes. It's using social media. But he has amazing widespread support in terms of the funding for his campaign. And 80% of the time, yes, in America, the campaign that spends more money wins. That is the way it works. It's very corrupt. You can buy so many advertisements, you can persuade so many people by the market, yes, by using radio and TV and even Facebook, paid advertisements to influence voters, yes. Trump will have more money. Trump will have more money than Sanders. The only one that might compete with Trump is Michael Bloomberg, who himself has $60 billion and has already spent $200 billion on his own personal campaign. Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, may be able to match Mr. Trump's spending. But nobody is going to match Bernie Sanders' people power. And if you ask me to bet, one side has the more money one side has the more people to knock on doors, make phone calls, my bet goes on the people power. Maybe that's idealistic, but otherwise I'm going to become cynical old man with gray hair that just develops more and more wrinkles. And I will be crying in my tea every afternoon. I don't want to be that person. I need to have hope, yes? And I think there is hope.
But that was the case last year, I mean, in previous elections also, because popular vote was with the Hillary Clinton. And this time also, popular vote will be, I mean, if the conditions remain the same, popular vote will be with the Democrat, with the electoral college.
Well, again, it's a matter of turnout. Hillary Clinton had more votes than Trump with a 54% turnout. If it had been 56%, she would have had still more votes, and she would have won. Mathematically, it's very clear. She would have won the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a outdated system that obviously allows for a state like California to have all of their 54 electors go to one candidate if that candidate just wins a little bit more popular vote in the state. And other states can have much larger majorities for the other candidate, but it doesn't carry as much weight. There is a movement to change the Electoral College. It is not going to be operational by next November. But there is a movement in the United States called Move to Amend. And so far, I think 25 states have agreed that and the state legislatures can do this, that the electors in their state will cast the votes for the candidate that wins more popular votes nationwide than anyone else. And so the state of Oregon, for example, my small little state that is just above California, that's on the west coast, my small state with only 4 million people, we have 7 electoral votes. It's not very many. But our state legislature has said, if no matter who the Oregonians vote for, the candidate that wins the more votes in the nation will receive our 7 votes. So for example, if Bernie Sanders wins Oregon, and he will, but if the odd thing happens that Mr. Trump wins more votes in the nation than Sanders, then Oregon's votes would go to Donald Trump. The idea is that we should have majority rule. Now I think that situation is not going to happen. And we need to have 35 states agree to have that arrangement. And that's not going to happen before November. But you can see that there's a movement to change the Electoral College. Is there a movement in India to change your system?
No, sir, whether it will come before November, change of the Electoral College.
No, it will not happen before November.
Sir, till the beginning of the new millennium, say 2004, it has been the foreign policy that has been influencing the American election. But afterwards, it's more of the domestic policy. And I'll give you America has been the champion of the torchbearer of globalization. Then, the backlash, the aftermath of globalization after 2004. Suddenly, America has who has been the champion of globalism and globalization, they have to, the domestic problems, economic problems, and people like Trump, he has to become hyper nationalist. So there is, the strong undercurrent between the economy, the real economy and world politics, influencing the American election.
Again, God comes to the poor in the form of bread. It's Gandhi, yes? If people are hungry, they are going to want to be able to have an economic system that can feed them. The Democrats and Republicans, since the Bretton Woods Agreement in World War II, agreed to set up what became the WTO, what became the World Bank and the IMF. That was all to promote global trade. And Democrats and Republicans favored that. I think they favored it in part because you look at those institutions. The IMF and the World Bank can be manipulated by the United States. Yes? And have been manipulated by the United States for our own national interests. Yes, it has promoted trade, and you can argue that everyone has benefited some, but the United States has benefited the most economically, again at the expense of the environment, which is coming to bite us in the butt. I mean, it is, there's a cost. That is a big externality that is not counted as part of the economic cost of globalization. Climate change is not counted as an economic cost, but it is. So I'm thinking still most Democrats, favor global internationalism, global liberalism, globalization. I do not. It's one reason that I didn't favor Hillary Clinton, because she was in favor of free trade. Well, free trade is not free. Free trade has a huge cost, especially for the countries that are the losers, like Mexico. In relation to the United States, most of the immigration that is coming to the United States from Mexico, including my own daughter, who came up to the U.S. illegally without documents, brought in by her mother, desperately trying to find a better life. This is economically propelled by the inequalities that globalization creates. And we don't need increased gap between rich and poor in this world. We need the opposite. Gandhi would not put up with this. I am told that some 50 wealthiest people in India have as much wealth as over half the population. Well, this is true in the United States. In fact, it's even worse. Our 5 biggest billionaires in the United States, 5, not 50, have as much wealth as the lower half of the population of the United States. This inequality cannot stand. And so we must have change. We must have greater equality. We must take down the walls. We must encourage greater justice and respect among people globally. We must.
In England, and finally he gets elected. And Corbyn, he talked about denuclearization, arms reduction. And you rightly mentioned the American economic imperialism embedded in military power.
I think it has become almost a fait accompli today that we have to build up our arsenal, get more arms and become powerful. You're trying to make a state a militarist state. Some are very glorified. Get arms from America or from there or here or Israel, and you create an enemy. You're ready to fight. And spending, and nobody speaks for arms reduction or disarmament. Where are we going to? I don't know.
Well, I mean, we need to change the culture of violence. And we can blame the arms manufacturers for that. We can, in the United States, blame the military-industrial complex, which is very real. But honestly, we need to blame ourselves. Turn that searchlight inward. Don't you believe in self-defense? You must believe in self-defense. What is the self that we are defending? Are we simply bodies in this world, walking through, and death is the end of it all? We have no soul? Are we so materialistic as to believe that all we are is just a body? If you believe that there's only body defense, then self-defense must be physical. If you believe, as I do, and as Gandhi did, that there is a soul, that the soul is immortal, cannot be harmed, it has a power beyond our imagination if we tap into it, then self-defense is my defense of my understanding the God within me. Self-defense is defending my soul. I cannot do that by military means. It does not work. So let us reconsider, what is self-defense? Can the United States or India really defend itself with nuclear weapons that are capable of destroying life on the planet as we know it? Is that really self-defense? To me, the cause and effect there is not very optimistic. If we continue to have faith in that kind of power, we will destroy ourselves sooner or later. For Gandhi and for me, and I hope for a few of you, self-defense should be spiritual. It should be the willingness to die for what you believe, to be a different kind of soldier, to understand that life is meaningful only if you are fighting for justice. And that to die in that fight is not to die. To die in that fight is to live on in the spirit of others. And I believe my soul cannot be harmed. My soul will carry on. Maybe it will be reborn in your child or in your little girl. I will carry on. I will carry on to fight. Let us not have such faith in the physical resources that we depend upon. I think we all need to eat, we all need to work, we all need to share. Today the world has enough for everyone to be able to survive reasonably well. There's not enough for the greedy. We cannot all be greedy or the world will be destroyed. So be the change you want to be. Don't just expect your leaders to do it for you. We must take charge. Hopefully we can elect some good leaders, but if not, let us simply continue to fight on for the justice that we know is possible.
again, thank you.